welcome again to Movie Science Review. I know it's been a while since I had posted a video, so I thought it was about time. Plus, I actually had a request. Someone requested that I take a look at Top Gun Maverick. And me being an airplane geek, I was most certainly willing to oblige in this request. And so I thought, hey, that'd be a fun movie to kind of take apart and take a look at. I did see it in the theaters, and so even the original Top Gun has a special place in my heart. And so I always thought that the sequel actually did a really good job of entertaining me, but I never really thought about taking a too critical eye of it. There was a few things I noticed when I watched it in the theaters. I thought, that's interesting. So now it's a really good chance to really kind of sit down and take a closer look at some of the science in the movie. So first of all, I am not a fighter pilot. While I do have some flying experience, I am most certainly not an expert in dogfighting and fighter tactics and that kind of stuff. But I am an airplane geek, and I do like the science behind aircraft and their performance. So I thought this would be kind of fun. So without any more delay, let's take a look at Top Gun Maverick. This movie's copyright Paramount Pictures, and this video is for fair use of such property. Also, spoilers. There'll be plenty of spoilers. So this is interesting. So 1969, note that in 1969, this was during the Vietnam War. And so there was a whole lot of dogfighting going on during the Vietnam War. And at this time, the conventional thinking was that missiles would be the big thing for aircraft. Forget about guns. Just you lob on after the Korean War, they built and designed missiles to shoot down other aircraft. So they figured, hey, pop some missiles on aircraft, press a couple of buttons, the enemy's gone. Well, it didn't work out that way. Missiles didn't work all that well. Sometimes they barely worked. And particularly the F-4 Phantom, which was initially went into service without a gun. It only had missiles. And when missiles started failing at a much higher than expected rate, they eventually slapped on a gun on it. And also dogfighting was a big thing. They weren't really concentrating on dogfighting. So here they're saying, hey, we need to be better dogfighters. Let's set up a special school for dogfighting and shooting guns, World War II style. So that's what the whole Top Gun thing comes after. So this is laser focus used on an aircraft carrier. There's a few things I thought was kind of neat here. I'm gonna go back. They're actually showing a F-35, which is a brand new aircraft for the all services, really, Air Force, Navy, Marines. And I thought it was interesting seeing on the carrier, because I believe when this was filmed, these technically, I don't even know if they were in service. They may have been doing carrier trials, but they were not in frontline service as far as I can remember. So this is one of the more advanced aircraft. This is like the only time you see it in a movie, but I thought that was interesting. Of course, this whole scene is reminiscent of the first movie. Is Super Hornet. And I'll go back a little bit here. The Super Hornet is basically one of the new frontline aircraft of the U.S. Navy. It is an F-18. It's actually almost a clean paper design of the F-18. They look a lot alike than the old F-18 ABs, except this is actually larger and has longer range and more carrying capacity, and it was all kinds of updated. So it's interesting. The movie, instead of F-14s in the original movie, now they're on to F-18s because the F-14s are no longer in service. So I thought this was neat. This is Tom Cruise in his hangar, and there's a P-51. This is a World War II aircraft. This was one of the top of the line American fighters in World War II, and it's got a very interesting development history to it. And I saw that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. He's got a P-51. And I looked up later. That's his. That's actually actor Tom Cruise's P-51. He owns this plane and knows how to fly it. Turns out that after he filmed the first Top Gun movie, he had an interest in flying, and so he got his pilot's license. And because he's made of money, now he has a pretty rare P-51 that's worth millions of dollars. And he's apparently quite capable of flying it and taking other people for rides and stuff. So that's pretty neat. So I thought this was funny. He's got his calendar for his test flight he's going to be doing. And I just thought it was kind of funny. There's some good stuff in here. What I thought was funny, well, let's see if you can see it here. Oh, there we go. He's got a pre-brief with telemetry, which is interesting. Telemetry is just data that comes from the aircraft, and then Mach 9, and then debrief. Well, what I thought was kind of funny is usually, I actually used to do flight test support for aircraft, and I don't remember us ever really splitting things up like this. The debrief would happen on the same day that he would do the flight, and same as the pre-brief. He might have another pre-brief with telemetry. That sounds like that could be a different day if he's talking to the actual engineers, but usually the pre-brief and the brief happens on the same day. It's odd that he would stick it on separate days, but whatever. And here we have the what do we call it? SR-72 Dark Star is what they called it. This was really neat aircraft to see. This is a fictional aircraft. This does not really exist, but it was. I was just thinking it's basically the love child between a SR-71 and something called an F-19, which was a fictional aircraft model I built as a kid. I just thought it was very, very reminiscent of the old SR-71 spy plane, but in a more modern version. But interesting, this was what I understand, it was actually partially designed for the movie by Lockheed engineers. And Lockheed, of course, built the original SR-71 spy plane. So they had a hand, and I see that later too. I'll talk about that. But they actually had real engineers help the movie design his aircraft, because it has some really neat stuff that's interesting attention to detail that I think only an engineer would have done, and not your typical Hollywood special effects person. Now, this aircraft is what they call a hypersonic aircraft. And if you ever heard that term before, you probably heard the term supersonic. Supersonic simply means faster than speed of sound. Hypersonic means not only faster than speed of sound, but 5 times or more faster than the speed of sound. And it is very, very difficult to do with an aircraft. They've done it with rockets, but not air-breathing aircraft. And so this whole part of the movie is he's going to try to fly very, very fast in this.
Mach 10. Let's give Mach 10.
So he says Mach 10. And I actually had to look that up. We have not had an aircraft to fly Mach 10 in the real world, other than a spaceship, something like the Space Shuttle or Saturn V. Those would fly that fast, but those are rockets. Those are not aircraft. But an actual aircraft to fly Mach 10 is extremely difficult. The closest thing we've had was the X-15, which they said went to Mach 6.7. And that technically was a rocket plane. It didn't have engines. This actually has jet engines in it, so to speak, and more. But so aircraft, this is purely fictional. He's at the bleeding edge of flight tests with this. So this was pretty exciting to see how they portray this. And here they have rolling it out. Let's go. Test base. So when I saw this, I actually said, "Oh wow, kudos to the production and the script on this." You see him exercising, and there's a good reason why he's doing that. For such aircraft like this, you'll see in a minute. This high altitude, high speed aircraft. You can see him getting into. He's breathing oxygen. He's exercising. He's getting into a flight suit. Now, this flight suit is basically a space suit. So when you fly that high in that type of aircraft, it looks like the cockpit itself is not pressurized. And they did this actually in the old U-2 spy planes and X-15s and SR-71s, really high altitude spy planes. They flew so high they had to wear basically spacesuits. They had to fly in essentially maybe a simplified spacesuit. So it's pressurized because you're so high, you need oxygen, but you just don't need oxygen. You need a pressurized volume of oxygen so that your body can absorb the oxygen well enough. But it's not at the same pressure as on the ground. It's less pressure. So with less pressure, there's less oxygen molecules for you to inhale. And so if you're not careful, you can develop nitrogen in your system and something called the bends. And you can really wreak havoc with your body, because if you're going from a high concentration of oxygen to low and back to a high and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get big into physiology because I barely understand it myself. But what he was doing with that exercising and breathing, that's what astronauts do. They call that a pre-breathe. And what it does is it acclimates your body to perform in this lower pressure realm by basically flushing your system with oxygen and getting rid of all the excess nitrogen out of your system, so that he's basically cleansing himself. And to help do that, you exercise for a while and you breathe pure oxygen, and then he's ready for flight. So I thought that was a really, really nice touch. They didn't have any exposition on it other than him doing that. So if you may have watched the film, like, why is he exercising and running? Is he ready to fight? No, that's a physiological thing that he needed to do to fly at high altitudes.
Ready for APU start.
I thought that was neat. APU, auxiliary power unit. Basically, it's a little engine to start the big engines.
Ready lift engine start. Ready right engine start.
And it's interesting that the APU comes with something along. It's something that comes up a little later in a sense. And so before you start the engines on the plane, you need power, right? And you need power to systems. And you can either use batteries or you can use something called an APU. An APU is, a lot of times, it's a little turbine jet engine, and an airliner has an APU, and it's just basically a little tiny jet engine that runs as a generator to help run the plane while the main engines are shut off, and so they can get power to run lights and air conditioning, that kind of stuff. And so apparently this jet has a little one like that. Not all jets have that, but it was interesting that I just caught that. Cranking up the baby, catching out. Well, that's a beautiful plane. That is just cool as beans. I need a model of that.
Looks good.
Clear explain.
Transitioning to scramjet.
All right, this really, I had a nerdgasm on this a little bit. So he said transitioning to scramjet. So let me see if I can disseminate this really quick in a simple way. So jet engines, turbine engines, basically is a spinning fan that produces thrust. I'm really simplifying it, but you spit fuel in, you ignite the fuel expands and spins the fan. The fan spins and it blows hot air out the back. And that's how pretty much all jet engines work. But they're only good to a certain speed. After a while, the air comes in too fast for the engine to run. And so that limits your speed with a jet engine. So they've actually experimented. This is a real thing. They have basically jet engines that don't have any moving parts. And there's different ones. There's called ramjets. He said SCRAM, which is an acronym for supersonic combustion ram jet, something like that. So basically the air comes in at the supersonic speeds, gets compressed, and they still spit fuel and they ignite it. But it's a very clever way of designing the engine. It takes very tight tolerances, very exact tolerances to make it so that the air comes in, hits just the right velocities, the right compression. And it's basically propels the aircraft at high speed. And now we've done that with test planes. Usually they're rocket boosted, and then because the scramjets doesn't work at too low a speed. You have to be supersonic for it even to start up. So it's useless on the ground. You're never going to take off with it. And so this aircraft has what we call a hybrid power system, or engine system, we want to call it. So for normal takeoff and landing you saw in a movie, or normal takeoff in this case, it has a regular jet engine that you see it like you fly in your airliner. But for high speed, supersonic, and hypersonic, it actually physically closes off the door to the regular engines and opens up another corridor for the scramjet. And they proposed doing that. They've actually experimented, and they've talked about how we could probably have really high-speed aircraft by being able to do that stuff. And it gets really complicated with the type of fuels you use and the hybrid. It's something that is giving engineers fits and doing it, but they're working on it. And I thought this was a great kind of visualization of that technology, where you actually see the doors closing for the jet engine here. And then you see on the bottom kind of thing, another thing lighting up. So they're closing off the jet engines because it's not going to work anymore at that high speed. So just close it off, streamline it, and then light up the ramjets or scramjets. And then, whoop, speed captain, you're off at hopefully at Mach 10 in his case. So I thought that was just really, really neat. So you can look at it. There you go. And they show all the Mach indications. This I thought was a good scene at the leading edge of the aircraft. You start to see it glowing. And that's a real thing. When you're flying that fast through the atmosphere, you got so much friction going through the atmosphere, the metal starts heating up. And so hypersonic and supersonic aircraft, one of the problems is making them so they don't melt. And literally, you've got part of the aircraft is starting to melt a little bit. And so you have to have metallurgy and special materials that it can handle sometimes thousands of degrees of heat in the nose, just so the aircraft doesn't melt itself. And I thought it was a nice touch to actually show that at the event, especially in Mach 10. It's going to be super, super hot. And so they show it exploding, and then they cut at it, and he's walking through the bar, and he had ejected somehow at Mach 10. And you don't normally eject aircraft at Mach 10 or any of the high Mach. It'll kill you instantly. There were some aircraft designed to fly high speed. I'm thinking one of them is the B-58 Hustler, which was a bomber, a supersonic bomber. And for ejection, you didn't eject like, World War II style or even modern jets where you pull a handle and you just pop out, the parachute pops out. No, this thing had a big capsule that fit over you, and you got ejected like you're inside of a pill or something, inside of a capsule. And even that probably would bang you around so bad that you'd be in the hospital for a while, but you'd live. And so ejecting, presumably this aircraft didn't show it, would have either a capsule-like thing that would fully enclose him as he ejected, or maybe the whole nose. That was another aircraft, I think F-111, had basically the whole nose section would pop off when you ejected, and you'd be in this kind of vessel container with a parachute on it. And so presumably he was in some sort of vessel as it ejected, either the whole nose of the aircraft or something like that. But still, it was not a walk in a park. You'd be lucky to be alive. And so that's why he's kind of walking around dazed. Funny, he's still carrying his helmet, but I thought it was, it's a movie, so, we'll go with it, but it's funny.
The plant sits in an underground bunker at the end of this valley. Said valley is GPS jammed.
Okay, so I remember some people saying, why can't you just lob a bunch of cruise missiles at this target instead of trying to flying in? It was a good thing, and I thought about that. I said, well, they said it was GPS jammed, and GPS jammers is a real thing. Cruise missiles, in part, are GPS guided. They're more sophisticated than just GPS. They have other guidance systems, but for the accuracy they're looking at here, GPS is probably the most accurate for the most part. I mean, I'm not an expert on cruise missiles, but I know they have inertial guidance systems, and they have GPS and a few other things. So they might get close enough to it, but for the precision, for the conceit of the precision they're talking about in this movie, it looks like they wouldn't be able to do GPS. Plus, it's a deep crevices too, so there would be some funky maneuvering to do that. So presumably they've analyzed it to try to use cruise missiles, and for this precision, they just figured they couldn't do it. So just go with it.
And defended by an extensive surface-to-air missile array, full reserve of surplus aircraft, even if.
And there's some shot of, lo and behold, F-14s. Now it's funny because the movie never says who they're shooting at. They said it's unnamed country number 5 that they're going to attack. But the only country other than in America that has F-14s is Iran. So this is not Iran, I guess.
Few old F-14s.
This would be a cakewalk for the F-35 stealth, but GPS jamming negates that.
Okay, so remember I mentioned F-35s at the very beginning on the aircraft carrier? And here he said, there'll be a cakewalk for L-35 stealth. I don't know, it's stealth E aircraft. It's not technically a stealth aircraft, but the GPS jammer makes it I don't know where to go with that. My first thought is, for one, when this was filmed, the F-35 wasn't really in frontline service, and these guys are all F-18 pilots, so they wouldn't be able just to jump into an F-35 and fly it. And F-35s are new, and I think F-35s are G limited as well, and there's all kinds of issues that interesting that they call it out, but I don't see how GPS. If GPS means that the F-35 can't do it, GPS jamming that is, then it also means that the F-18s can't do it. So it's not like GPS only affects one aircraft, from what I can tell. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. But that seemed really weird that he would say, yeah, GPS jamming F-35s can't do it. F-35s are not F-117s. Those are two different aircraft. So I just thought that was odd.
Surface-to-air threat necessitates a low-level, laser-guided strike, tailor-made for the F-18, I figure.
Well, F-18 is not the only aircraft that has laser-guided strikes. Most of the attack aircraft in the American inventory have laser-guided strikes, laser pods, that kind of stuff. So, but this is Top Gun. This is Navy. We're going to use F-18s, and we're going to make all kinds of conceits to make sure we use F-18s. Eject. Okay, this is a flashback to the first movie, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Showing a flat spin, which is something that the F-14 really can do. And if it does get into a flat spin, I understand that it's almost impossible to get out. So that's why they ejected. And he lost his old buddy. Still a nice flashback. And I understand that actually can happen, that in a flat spin, when the canopy is ejected like that, or explosive bolts, throw it off, that it can kind of hover there for if you're in a flat spin, and that's you hit it. So that is something that can known to possibly happen in certain situations.
Am I dismissed?
And there's Goose V2. So the only reason I popped this up because I thought it was neat. They're showing them actually doing what we call a pre-flight. So pilots like to walk around the aircraft and check things out. Just as sort of, it's part ceremonial and part a real thing. Depends on the aircraft. I think the more sophisticated the aircraft, the less, it may have a little less utility. But it's still, it's a thing that pilots like to do. Just kind of walk around, look for anything out of the ordinary. So I thought it was nice seeing that. While Maverick and Goose V2 were having a discussion, and they show them sort of looking around the aircraft, opening the hatches, checking things out, making sure things don't look out of whack. And so that's basically what it is.
Good morning, aviators. This is your captain speaking. Welcome to Basic Fighter Maneuvers.
One quick notice, I listened to a podcast of how they filmed some of this stuff. And all the flight scenes were done in real aircraft, but not real F-18s. So all the flight scenes you see them in the cockpit was actually in an aircraft. It wasn't green screen, which was nice. There was some CGI used to CGI in, say, the fins from an F-18. So they used a lot of times. I think they used the L-39 jet trainer, which is a two-seat jet trainer, and they would CG in some of the fins so it looks like an F-18 as they're sitting in the cockpit. But they were flying around in aircraft and being bounced around and banged around and that kind of stuff.
So what's the...
Okay, there we go. I knew it was good. I always thought it was a nice touch. The guy in the back, his name is Fanboy, and that font is the original font from Star Trek, the original series from the 60s. So I thought that was great that he's maybe a sci-fi geek fanboy, and he's got the Star Trek font. That was pretty cool.
Skin in the game. Nothing on the radar.
So I'm very familiar with a lot of the radar screens for fighter aircraft from previous experience and stuff, and I saw this and was like, no. It's kind of sort of like a radar screen, and some of the font stuff on the perimeter is actually not too bad, but the stuff in the middle, no, it doesn't look anything like that. But I know they probably simplified it for movie audiences and that kind of stuff. So excuse me. That's not too bad. This is the heads-up display. So the heads-up displays that the fighter pilots use to show information, because they can't look down while they're flying, looking down at the, how's that look? No, you got to look up and stuff. And so you've got a screen right in front of your face called the heads-up display. Basically, it's a piece of glass that reflects off a projector. And so it'll tell you your airspeed, your altitude. He's in gun mode. There's a little pipper thing here, and so this will tell him where to shoot. So he's got to get this little thing lined up on the aircraft and press the trigger, and then the bullets will conceivably hit the thing. It'll tell you other stuff, how much G's you're pulling, all kinds of weapons modes. Now the funny thing is, he's in gun mode, but they're supposed to be firing missiles at each other apparently, or something, or they're acting like they're firing missiles at each other, but really he's not. So I don't know what's going on there, but I just thought that was pretty funny, but they did a pretty good job on the HUD screen, I thought.
Pushing it too low. Pull up, you're hitting the hard deck.
So go back here just for a second. It's talking to you. Let me go back.
You're too low. Pull up. You're hitting the hard deck.
So that's a real thing in fightercraft. They call it the Bitchin' Betty, and it will give you visual warning, give you audio warnings of certain things. Like if you're about to hit the ground, it will say altitude, altitude. And it was a real lady that did that. Her name was what was her name? Leslie Shook. At least for one of the companies, I think Boeing. They recorded her voice to do several things. It'll say altitude, lock, and a few other things. And so they found out, interestingly enough, they tried different voices, and they found out that the female voice would get the pilot's attention better than the male voice. And I think it didn't matter whether it was male or female pilot. It's just that the female voice would kind of catch. Maybe it's like the mother effect. She's like, pull up your pants. Oh, what? Okay, yes, mom. So that is a real thing. That if the computer in an aircraft says that you're about to hit the ground, it will warn you. And there's a whole series of warnings that it'll talk about. So I thought that was pretty cool. You can hear that.
Fight's on. What is with these two?
I saw this in the theater. I was like, okay, so that's visually exciting, but I don't see how that had to be very, very highly coordinated for two guys to do that kind of stuff. It wouldn't be just one guy just saying, okay, I'm gonna go and mope and show you something, Maverick, and go into this weird corkscrew thing straight at the ground. That seems like a highly unrealistic aerobatic maneuver that close. So it's fun to watch, but it seems highly unlikely that anybody would do anything like that in a real aircraft that close without lots and lots and lots and lots of practice first.
Hey fellas, you're running out of room.
Altitude. Your strategy is about to run us into the ground.
With the Bitchin' Betty.
Altitude. 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 Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up.
Too late. Had your chance.
Okay, so they're in a new scene. They're still doing the dogfight, and he pulls up, and then pushes over down. That's called a Cobra maneuver, if I understand correctly, and it can be real dangerous. The guy can run into him like that, but the Russians can do that really well with some of their aircraft with thrust vectoring, and so he pulls up, immediately pushes back down. He's going to bleed off a whole bunch of airspeed doing that, but he gets right behind him, and he's right behind him.
That's a kill.
And again, you hear the sound. It's supposed to be the missile lock, but really he's got the gun. So they're great for, it's easy for the audience to understand, but the weapon systems don't work anywhere near. I've actually heard people say that even as pilots, doing sailing actually helps them become better pilots to get a better understanding of some of the aerodynamics and wind and that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty neat thing. I actually have a little teeny tiny sailboat myself, and it is a lot of fun.
Pull on the backstay! Keep powering the sails! Okay!
So there's some correlation between sailing and flying. Very cool.
It's sort of like raising the flaps on an airplane.
Yeah, I don't know what she means by that, but raising the flaps means they augment your lift. So raising the flaps is actually reducing the lift and giving you more speed. So I guess, yeah, maybe.
You ready?
For what?
The afterburner.
And it's in sailing terms called the jib, and it's a special sail for going downwind, and it just makes you go a lot faster. It's not really good for attacking upwind, but if you're going to do a downwind run, pop up a jib, and yeah, it is a bit like an afterburner for sailboats.
Radar-guided surface-to-air missiles.
Yeah, missiles. Now remember that radar-guided surface-to-air missiles. Remember that.
Defend the area. These SAMs are lethal. That's because
yeah, that's the whole point. It's to be lethal.
it's fifth generation.
So this is interesting. This fighter, this is a real plane. This is not a movie magic. Obviously, just CG on the screen, but this is a Russian plane, a new plane called a Su-57, aka the Pakfa, And this is very new. I looked up how many. They only built about 20 of them. When I was in the theater, it's like, hey, that's a PATFA. That's interesting. They're so new. There's barely any of them out there. So it seems odd that a country like not Iran would have some when even the Russians barely have any. But it's still neat to see it in there. And it is. This is their most advanced, one of their most advanced fighters out there.
Fighters wait at an airbase nearby. The faster you navigate this canyon, the harder it will be to stay under the radar of these enemy SAMs. The tighter the turns, the more intensely the force of gravity on your body multiplies.
So I thought this was funny because he's not wrong. They told you G-forces. He's actually absolutely correct how the G-forces work. But I just thought it was funny that he's telling this to seasoned pilots that are in Top Gun school or graduated from the Top Gun school. It's like explaining basic algebra to a math professor. Why? Great for the audience. It's exposition for the audience. Is just completely silly that you would tell somebody. If you went to a pilot and said, "Did you know G-forces, exhibit more forces on your body as you turn?" He'd look at you like you had 5 heads and say, "Why are you telling me this? I learned this in primary flight school." Before flight school. It's insulting. I just thought that was funny.
Compressing your lungs, forcing the blood from your brain, impairing your judgment and reaction time.
So actually, this is neat that they're showing. This is the pilot is you wouldn't really have sustained G's, doing this. But if you're in a turn and you're constantly turning or pulling up, this would start to happen. As the blood drains from your head, you start going to what they call a blackout. And so as far as all the descriptions I've heard, it literally does this. Your vision starts collapsing on you and until you pass out. And this is a real thing. They have something called G suits for pilots that will help prevent this from happening as much as you can. There's some techniques the pilots themselves do with their bodies, and there's a G suit which squeezes your legs and helps keep the blood kind of up. It's still only good to about 9 Gs or so, but it does prevent, it does mitigate that from happening. And so this guy had the same thing happen to him.
Miracles. Two pairs of F-18s will fly in a welded wing formation. On final approach, you'll invert directly into a steep dive. This allows you to maintain the lowest possible altitude.
Okay, so I thought this was a neat thing to show because they've got to go into this valley, and so they're flying upright. In fact, hey, I've got a little visualization tool here, huh? So you can see there, I thought it was neat how they showed because they're flying presumably at fairly high speed, and they've got to go up and down into the valley to bomb the thing. The problem is you go up and over, normally you're into a negative G, and there's all kinds of problems with doing that. You can do what they call a red out, which all the blood goes to your head, and that's even worse than a blackout. Or also the aircraft is not rated for that much negative Gs. We call it negative Gs because you're kind of pushing over. So this thing's moving on me. So in the movie, they show them as they're flying, they roll inverted and then come down and pull. And that's that I noticed that. It's like, that's probably a much better technique because 2 things. 1, you can handle more Gs inverted. And 2, the aircraft is designed to handle more Gs. It's still a positive G because you're pulling. And so it may look like inverted, but it's the same thing as flying and doing this. So you're pulling up, you're pulling a lot of positive Gs. Your G suit is designed to handle that. The aircraft is designed to handle that. And so you're basically doing the same thing, it's just you're inverted. So you're coming up and pulling positive Gs by coming down, and then you see them roll back out and bomb their target.
And the only possible attack angle. Your target is an impact point less than 3 meters wide.
That's impossible, even for a computer.
It's not impossible. I used to bullseye womp rats in my T-16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters.
Stay on target. Of course, this has a lot of a Star Wars feel to it.
The 2-seat aircraft will paint the target with a laser bullseye. The first pair will breach the reactor by...
So I thought this was interesting because, normally you
Lead
can,
aircraft will paint the target with a laser bullseye.
one aircraft can target its own weapons, but you can use a second aircraft to target as well. So I think presumably they were using 2 aircraft because they're doing a lot of stuff at once. One would focus on flying a really steady pattern and laser it, and the other one will release. And I think the one behind, since it's lasering, so for example, if you got 2 aircraft, right? And so if I can see this here, so you get one behind the other. And so this one is going to drop the bomb. This one is going to do the lasering. Do we have another? I got more visuals. Here we go. 2 aircraft. All right. So Big Mouth here is going to laser the target, and the little guy here is going to bomb. So if Big Mouth is behind, so this guy is ahead, he can drop the bomb and then pull away. And this gives Big Mouth here a little more time to laser the target as the bomb is traveling towards the target. So I thought that's probably why they did 2 aircraft. I thought that was pretty clever. So you got more time for the bomb to hit the target because they're in a valley. Remember, they don't have a lot of options. So they got to hit and zoom out. And so the guy behind them has a little extra time to help guide the bomb in. And presumably when the bomb hits the target, then he can fly out as well.
The first pair were...
You saw a laser targeting pod. That's what that was. It's on a gimbal, and the 2-seater aircraft can
reach the reactor by dropping a laser-guided bomb on an exposed ventilation hatch.
It's only 2 meters wide, right?
This will create an opening for the second pair. The second team will deliver the kill shot and destroy the target.
A steep climb at that speed, you're pulling at least 8 Gs.
9 minimum.
The stress limit of the F-18's airframe is 7.5.
So I actually looked that up, and that's correct. So I talked about G's as you're flying, and you pull up, you feel the G's, and aircrafts generally are rated for a certain amount of G's by design and by operational. So usually they call it what they do derating, what they call it. So the aircraft may be able to do 9, 10 Gs, but they're only supposed to do like 7, because if they do more than that, it really, really stresses the airframe. And so apparently F-18s are rated for 7.5 Gs. But he says, no, you're going to be pulling 9 Gs. And so that's right at the edge of what the body can take. But it also means that the aircraft is going to be really, really stressed. And that's why he said he may bend the aircraft. And that has happened. Pilots have overstressed aircraft, and the wings get bent up or something after he flies, and the aircraft basically is written off. It's just too damaged. It may still fly technically and land, but it's no longer suitable for combat. It's just bent all out of whack. So yes, it's a thing. It's absolutely right.
That's the accepted limit. To survive this mission, you'll pull beyond that, even if it means bending your airframe.
Yep. See, like I said, he talks about bending airframe, and that has happened since the dawning of time. Pilots have bent their aircraft in all kinds of ways, but sometimes you need to bend the aircraft to live. So you do what you have to do. Aircraft can be replaced. People can't.
You'll be pulling so hard you'll weigh close to 2,000 pounds. Your skull crushing your spine. Your lungs imploding like an elephant sitting on your chest.
Other than that, how was your day?
Fighting with everything you have just to keep from blacking out.
That's Tone. Maverick's got missile lock on us. Blue team, that's a fail. Level out, Coyote.
I love in this movie, Maverick just comes in and LOL pistol stomps him every way. He's an unstoppable, unbeatable force, and that's how you do a sequel, man. You bring back the old character, the old heroes, and maybe they have some flaws and they have some things, but they're still good. So Star Wars, are you listening?
Coyote, copy.
And he passes out from
Coyote, come in.
So
Coyote, level wings.
I understand once you black out,
He's in G-lock.
about a good 30-40 seconds.
Too close.
You're
Bird strike, bird strike.
And then we have a bird strike. And while these jet engines are designed to try to be able to survive bird strikes, sometimes it can't. It'll happen. Just like that big, was it the 730? It was Airbus 737 that hit a huge amount of birds, and both engines were conked out. due to bird strikes, and he had to glide it into the Hudson River in New York. And so there again, bird strike. Warning.
Phoenix, left engine's on fire! Climbing!
I thought this was a good thing when, for understand when you do have a situation like that or a burst strike, one of the first things you do in a jet like that is climb, pull up. It gives you altitude, it gives you options, and if you have to eject, you've got some more altitude to do it. So, in fact, I think that happened in a real aircraft. I think I saw a video where it was a jet and he hit some birds and stuff, and it was a training flight. First thing they did was they pull up to get a little more altitude. You're going to bleed off speed, but if you're, it's better to have a little bit of altitude. You have more time to make decisions and assess your situation. So that was
throttling back, shutting off fuel to left engine, extinguishing fire.
So that sounded pretty neat. I'm not an F-18 pilot, so I can't tell you the exact procedure, but it sounded reasonable to shut down that engine and possibly do a restart if you have enough altitude. It actually looks pretty damn high in this scene. So in this case, you probably have an option of trying to restart for a few moments.
Right engine is out.
Well, unfortunately, something happened to the right engine. This is a two-engine aircraft. The left engine is already conked out, and suddenly the right engine decides he doesn't want to get with the program, which seems odd. You think they do both at the same time, but whatever. So the movie, right engine goes out.
Still spinning. Try to restart it.
And that's
Phoenix, it's on fire! Don't stop!
Like I said, a restart.
Pulling up.
Oh my god.
Okay, so this part kind of confused me. So, okay, one engine's out, fine. She can trim and go up. Tries to restart the other one. It conks out, blows out. Okay, fine. But why the death spiral? The control surface, everything's still working. Why suddenly, with no engines, she's suddenly diving at the ground in a death spiral? That seems kind of weird.
We're on fire! Damn it!
Engine fire right.
Extinguishing right engine!
Phoenix, Bob, punch out! Punch out! Warning lights everywhere! Hydraulic failure!
Flight control.
I can't control it!
We're going down!
Yeah, what? Doesn't look like she was in a stall, or that just seemed very odd to me. Just because both engines are out doesn't mean you don't have flight controls. These things are designed, even with both. I actually looked it up because I was thinking, does this thing have a APU like we saw earlier on? Does it have a hypergolic backup power system like some do? And actually, interesting enough, these planes, and she even said it, the engine's still spinning. So as long as the engine is spinning freewheeling, it's just generating power. So she should have plenty of power to the flight controls. I don't know, at least from one of the engines, just freewheeling the generator. So I don't know why. It's exciting, it's pretty cool, but like, if you know, let me know in the comments. Look at that. So this is a AWACS plane. This is basically a flying radar. This plane, the Navy uses these things forever. This design is actually probably quite old, and they're still using it. And this big dish on top is a radar system, and it can see very far, see lots of targets. It helps coordinate the aircraft carrier with the fighters and that kind of stuff. And so you'll see a bunch of scenes with them inside this aircraft, and that's what it basically was. Think of it as a flying, super powerful radar.
Comanche 1-1 set. Picture clean. Recommend dagger continue.
Copy. Dagger's descending below radar.
So they didn't say whose radar, because presumably that plane we just saw earlier could still see them even if they flew low. The enemy radar, maybe they may be able to fly low enough to get into what we call ground clutter. So as the radar bounces off parts of the ground and the waves and stuff like that, it can get obscure and confuse the radar. But I would think that the flying one would still be able to see them.
Dagger's now.
Yeah, see, it disappears off the radar. I thought that, I was like, I don't think it would work like that.
Now below radar.
The contrails, as they're flying low like that, just the vapor cone, the planes really do that as the condensation of the the moisture goes over the wings at high speed. That's pretty beautiful shot. There they wax again. Oh, they're back on radar.
Comanche. We're picking up 2 bandits.
And there they are, the Su-57 Pakfaz. Neat looking plane, basically equivalent of our F-22 stealth fighter, more or less, with some extra goodies that you'll see later. And here basically we have the trench run from Star Wars.
Seconds to target. Bob, check your laser. Air to ground check complete. Laser code verified. 1688. Laser is a go.
All right, there's the laser pod again. That's pretty cool.
Sir! Shit! Deadeye!
Okay, so it looks like something happened and either got into what they call a gimbal lock or it just went haywire. But I thought that's kind of funny because I think you can manually aim those things. So I don't know why it would kind of go wonky like that. But, you know, who knows? Again, it's a movie. Make it exciting. Can't everything go right, right?
Come on, guys. We're running out of time. Radar warning. Smoke in the air. Phoenix, break right.
Emergency jettison. Dagger 3 defending.
Everyone defending.
So I thought it was interesting because these are radar-guided missiles, right? They said these are radar surface-to-air missiles, and they're throwing out flares. Although the button said shaft flare, I don't know if it's a separate thing or combined on F-18s. I don't know that much, but there's a difference between shaft and flare. Shaft literally is started as bits of metal that you spit out the aircraft to confuse the enemy radar. And so that would, since the missiles are radar guided, that shaft is what you want to mess with them. Then flares are for infrared or heat sinking missiles. And so they didn't say anything about these being heat sinking. And so unless these radar guided missiles are hybrid radar and heat sinking, it seems odd that they would be popping out a whole bunch of flares, or they did have one button, but maybe they have one button for everything. Again, I don't know F-18, so maybe it's just a simple, in case of missiles, break glass, hit button, and it just spits out stuff. And interesting to note that missiles are not designed, modern missiles are not designed to hit the aircraft. They're designed to explode next to the aircraft, and that does more damage. So not necessarily you have to worry about the missile hitting you, it's just getting the missile close enough to you that when it explodes, that it doesn't shred your aircraft. That's just a cool shot. See it exploding there. That was exciting. So we're skipping ahead to after somebody got hit.
You've got to be shitting me.
Go steal an aircraft.
An F-14?
Yeah, F-14. Maverick knows all about F-14. Again, F-14s haven't been made since maybe the early 80s, late 70s. Early 80s, I think they were still making a few, maybe the D models or something. So so here they conveniently found an F-14 that is fueled up and ready to go. They just need to go in, and it even has weapons on it. And Maverick knows all about it. Oh, look at that. The F-14. I've seen these a lot at air shows when I was a kid, and it was such an exciting plane to see fly. It's always going to have a special. Now, the F-14 has what they call swing wings. So you can see the wings are moving out, and that's designed to have to increase the flight envelope of the aircraft. So this aircraft was designed as a fleet defense fighter for the Navy. It's designed to fly very fast. It would carry very long-range missiles, basically a great interceptor. But the problem is it's big and heavy, and to take off and land on aircraft carrier decks that are very short, you need a lot of lift on the aircraft to fly slow. And so the wings are designed to move out so it can fly slow and be aerobatic. But the wings can move in for less drag, and it can fly very, very fast with the wings swept back. And so to take off and land, you got to swing the wings out, and you can lower flaps, and that will shorten your takeoff distance.
Why are the wings coming out, Matt?
Of course, he would absolutely know why the wings are coming out. I think he's being sarcastic because as a fighter pilot, even though he may have never flown F-14s, he knows what they are. His father flew them. He probably know all about them and know why the wings come out. And it's not the only aircraft that the wings move like that. So obviously he's going to take off from the taxiway, not even the runway. And I thought it was a funny scene. But they make it. He was turning on a beacon. Normally when pilots eject, they have, I think military pilots have basically a tracking beacon so they can find them for rescue. And so it looks like he thought, hey, maybe I should turn this sucker on so they know not to shoot us out of the air.
Sir, we're receiving a signal from Rooster's ESAT.
What? Yeah, and he said an ESAT. I'd have to look that up. It's probably something akin to an emergency locator beacon.
Sir, Overwatch reports an F-14 Tomcat is airborne and on course for our position.
Now, I saw that. I was like, just how would they know it's an F-14? They would not know it was an F-14. They get a blip. It's going X speed. And presumably it is not transmitting any type of friend or foe that they would say there's a blip and it's got what's his name's maybe they might be able to determine that what's his name is in there. Even that's sort of questionable whether they would know exactly the distance of the beacon. But maybe it has a GPS. I don't know. Like I said, I might not be wrong on that one, but they wouldn't know it's an F-14. I'd be very suspicious that they would know that much information.
Mav, tally 2, 5 o'clock low.
Okay, and there's the big bad guys coming up.
What do we do?
Oh crap, we're in it now.
Hey, listen, just be cool. If they knew who we were, we'd be dead already.
Now, one thing I was wondering is like, so here you see the F-14 Maverick, the wings are swept back. I don't know how fast he's flying and how much fuel he has, but presumably, if he was in trouble, if he was trying to escape enemy territory, he would probably be balls to the wall, full afterburner, unless he has like very little fuel, and trying to get out of Dodge as fast as he can. And as I mentioned, the F-14 is a very fast aircraft, even though it's old now and no longer in service. And I looked up the numbers. It is faster than this Su-57. So presumably they would not be able to catch up with him. He would be hauling butt if he was at full speed, full military power and afterburners and that kind of stuff. So I just thought that was funny that I think, how did they catch up to him so easily? He should have been hard to catch. But hey, what was he?
Hello. All right, listen up. When I tell you grab those rings above your head, that's the ejection handle.
Of course, there's actually two ejection handles. There's one above your head and one below in your crotch area. So I thought that was funny. And again, he's telling a seasoned fighter pilot how to eject. All fighter pilots basically have the same ejection system. Pull the multicolored handle. It's not it's not rocket sciences.
Splitting the throttles.
So I thought that was neat. I know it went by real fast. Basically, he's doing some aerobatics, and so he's what he calls splitting the throttles. Basically, since it's a twin-engine aircraft, to improve aerobatics, one engine is going to be throttled up, the other one throttled back, and then he hits the rudders and elevators, and he can maneuver and kick around. And so I understand that's actually a real thing you can do if you're real careful and know what you're doing for dogfighting. He saw him go into a left yaw turn. That was pretty cool.
Taking a shot.
How convenient for them to leave missiles on their aircraft. And there, so here you see a bit of a combination of the Cobra maneuver you saw Maverick do earlier, and sort of a pirouetting spin, almost a reversal, but just sort of a stop in the air, spin around. This aircraft can do that because it has what's called thrust vectoring, so the engine nozzles can move in different directions. They can do really extreme aerobatics. Now, that missile came really close. Presumably, that missile should have exploded because, as I said before, they're designed to explode when it gets near the aircraft. So normally, you don't do that with missiles because you just get pounded. My only thought is maybe the missile didn't arm or something. I'm not sure it was a dud, but I just thought it was funny that he was able to do that and not the missile not explode. But still, visually, that's very exciting to see.
We gotta get low. The terrain will confuse his targeting system.
Okay, so we saw that before. I was talking about the ground clutter, and maybe that might work, but Maverick wouldn't know that. How would he know the capabilities of their radar. Maybe they do. Maybe that's a top secret thing. But I wouldn't think that we would have that much information. And usually, radar is designed to be hardened against losing stuff in ground clutter. But you never know.
Here he goes!
Yeah, see, the show he's going over the place. Like, okay, that close. I don't think it would confuse the radar at all, being that close to it. The return would be so strong that there would be no mistaking that. There's an airplane right in front of you, fire at will. But hey, hey, it's a movie, right? And that worked. Anyways, moving ahead. I thought this was funny. He flips a switch, turns on what looks like the radar system.
Mav, I got the radio on.
And says he's got the radio on. I was like, that ain't the radio, that's the radar. So I don't know if there's one switch for everything, but I just thought that was like, huh?
Standing, get it. Oh my God.
Okay, I thought that was kind of neat. That is sounds like what we call the radar warning receiver. So there's modern fighter aircraft, have electronic equipment that tells you when somebody's looking at you with their radar, and you get all kinds of lights and buzzers saying somebody's looking at you with a radar, and it's a weapons system, and you better consider your options.
Where the hell is this guy? He's on our nose.
So, Goose V2 turned on the radar and didn't see an airplane right in front of him. Also, this guy, why isn't he not shooting missiles? Presumably he knows that his buddies just got shot down and there's a bad guy. And I don't know if he needs to do visual confirmation first, but presumably in that case, he'd probably be firing first and asking questions later. So he does fire a missile, but in visual range. These missiles have miles and miles of range. You don't have to even be able to see your target to fire a missile at it. You just has to be on a radar system, which can see a lot farther than your eyeballs can. So he should have been firing that missile a lot further away. But hey, our hero's got a. And I thought this was a funny scene when he gets hit by the bullets. They're not very powerful. Usually these planes have some pretty powerful weaponry, 20, 30 millimeter cannons. And it looks like he's being shot by 22.
Rooster, there's no other way.
Yeah. And presumably he's the cavalry hangman. Fires one of his missiles to save Maverick.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
But what I thought was funny is, so presumably he just fired a missile and blew it up real good, the enemy. But he's got all his weapons. There's nothing missing. I see the on the outer pods look like probably I guess sidewinders, looks like. Maybe some AMRAAMs or something on the inner pods. And these are interesting. He's loaded with the bombs, I think the GBU-24s that we saw earlier. But so what did he fire? Was there a mysterious other launch point? More got details. There's another shot. It looks like everything's on. He should be missing one missile somewhere.
I'll see you back on deck.
Yeah, I don't, because he got a centerline tank. Got tanks. I just thought that was funny.
Maverick is downwind. No front landing gear. No tail hook.
Okay, this is funny. Now the front landing gear got blown off when he hit the thing, so presumably he knows that there's no front landing gear. He probably heard it. Not sure why the tail hook. The tail hook was gone. Unless that got hit too, but I would think the main gear would. I'm not sure why he knew that there's no tail hook. I would have put a scene with him trying to lower the tail hook and not doing anything. Then he would know there's no tail hook.
Pull the cable and raise the barricade.
Foul deck, foul deck!
And this is a tail hook you see on his buddy, the F-18. This is a grappling hook. So when it lands on a carrier, it grabs one of the lines and stops the plane really, really quick. Otherwise, the plane would just basically roll off the end of the deck because it couldn't stop fast enough. So this is tail hook grabbing the line. Maverick, open that hook. Crude but effective.
Thank you for.
And so here we see the end scene, sort of reminiscent of the end scene in the first movie.
Saving my life.
That's what my dad would have done.
I got something in my eye. I don't know what it is. Must be the dust or something. I don't know. That is awesome. All right, so that is Top Gun Maverick. I hope you found this interesting and that bored yourself to tears. It's still a fun movie. Really good, really great sequel to the original. I think on the whole, it's probably more accurate in a lot of ways than the original one was. But still, it's got some things that are questionable. But it's Hollywood, and I'm just amazed that they were able to produce this. Tom Cruise is amazing that he can reprise his role in a believable manner. And it had some great cameos from other actors and characters. And it was a lot of fun. And I had seen it once in the movie, and it was great to see it again, even at home, just to watch it. And I was really entertained again by it. Airplanes. So thanks again for watching Movie Science Review, and hang with me. I'll try to get some more stuff. And I hope this was both entertaining and informative. So until next time, may the science be with you.